In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to work with line charts within your Flutter application. We're going to be using the FLChart package to achieve showing the line charts on our Flutter application, and I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know to customize these line charts and display whatever data you want within them. So with that said, let's get into it. Before we begin, I'd quickly like to mention the links to all of the resources that I mentioned within this video, as well as a link to the source code can be found in the video's description down below, so feel free to take a look at it if you're confused at any point. With that said, let's get going. Before we code anything, what I'd like to do is actually go over the packages that we're going to be using. And luckily in this video, we're only using one package, and that is going to be the FLChart package. Again, link to this will be down in the description below, as well as the source code. So let's copy this, come back to our Flutter project. I'm using the boilerplate starter Flutter project that you get when you run the Flutter create command. And from here, I'm going to go to pubspec.yaml, scroll down to where I see dependencies, paste it in. Once I've added a dependency, I'm going to do command save, and I'm going to make sure that Flutter pub gets run. Once that is done, I'm going to select the correct target where I want to run my application. In this case, this is the Pixel 9 simulator. And after that, I am going to start debugging my application. So once the application is now running on the simulator, then I will resume the video. Welcome back, everybody. So as you can see, the application is now running on the simulators. So it means that it was built successfully. So now what I'm going to be doing is just cleaning up the code a bit so it's easier for us to understand what's going on. So the first thing that I'm going to do is basically remove the my homepage class that we get by default when we initialize a new empty Flutter project. Then within my lib folder, I'm going to create a new folder called pages. And since I really like reusability in my code and I want to ensure that we follow good coding principles, I'm going to create the line chart widget in a way that you can create multiple instances of that widget wherever you want with whatever data you want. So to do that, we're also going to be creating another folder called widgets. And for now, we're going to leave it. Let's come back to the pages folder, create a new file here and call this home_page.dart. I am going to create a stateless widget. I'm going to call it home page. And with this done, let's come to the build function and here return a scaffold. With this done, let's come back to our main.dart file, come to the material apps home property and change that to be home page. And let's do command save. And now our simulator should update, hot reload, and we should be seeing a empty screen. With this done, we're ready to actually delve into the coding process. So what I'd like to do is basically ensure that I create my line chart widget in a way that it's reusable and I can use it as many times as I want with whatever data I want. So for that, what I'm going to be doing is coming to the widgets, and here I'm going to be creating a new file, and I'm going to call this custom_line_chart.dart. Then within this, I'm going to create another stateless widget, and I'm going to call this custom line chart. And for the build function, for now, let's just return a card like so. Let's do command save. Let's come back to our home page. And then within my home page, I am going to be basically within the scaffold defining the body property. And I'm going to do that to be sizedbox.expand, within which I'm going to have a child. The child will be a column. And within this column, we'll have a children's list. And this children's list will contain my custom line chart. So with this done, that's pretty much all we had to do. Nothing's going to change because our custom line chart for now just returns an empty card widget. So now we can actually come into the good part and start coding. So within my card, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is adding a child, and the child will be line chart. And this is the actual widget that comes from the FLChart package. It requires some actual data that we need to pass to it. And if I hover over it, you can see that there are certain things that it expects. The only thing that is required is the data, which is of type line chart data. So let's work with this then. So to do that, I am going to pass it a line chart data object, and then the line chart data object doesn't require anything, but let's do command save. And you are going to see that it's giving me an operation error saying that there's an unsupported operation of infinity or NaN. And the reason this is happening is if I actually open up the terminal, you are going to see that if I go to the debug console, we're getting an error, and the error most probably is going to say that this actual card has undefined constraints on it. So what's basically happening is that the actual engine, Flutter engine, doesn't know how much size is this chart going to take. So most probably from this error, I can deduce that I need to just come back to my home page, come to where I have my custom line chart, and basically wrap this with a sized box widget. And then I can give my sized box a height of 300 and a width of 300. And I believe that by doing this, the error should be fixed. Yep, as you can see. And now we can see the actual card, and within the card we have our chart being displayed to us. It doesn't have any data within it yet, that's why it's not displaying us anything, but we'll fix that. One other thing that I'd like to do is on the column, I'd like to change the main axis alignment to be main axis alignment.center, and then the cross axis alignment again to be cross axis alignment.center. Save, and we can move on to the next step, which is coming back to the custom line chart. So we have this line chart data, and it expects a couple of things that we can pass to it. The first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is how can we display our own data on this chart. So this practically comes down to a property that we pass to the line chart data object, and it's called line bars data. And it's actually a list, and this list basically expects objects of line chart bar data type. And the reason we pass in a list is because on the same line chart, we can show different lines if that is a use case that we want. But in this case, I'm just going to be drawing one line. So here I'm going to be only passing the line bars data, a list which contains only one element, which is going to be of type line chart bar data. So what I'm going to be doing is making sure that I create a function which returns line chart bar data. And I'm going to say that this function is going to be called underscore build line chart bar data, and then it's going to return a line chart bar data like so. Then I'm going to take this, add this function here within the list, and now we can define here what the actual data is going to be. So the data here we can define as spots, and these spots are basically the dots that you see on a line chart, and then we can connect them later on, and they need to be of type FLChart. So what I'm going to be doing is making my widget in a way so that I can pass this data from outside so that I can have multiple different instances of this custom line chart with different data. So let's do that. So to do that, let's come to the top. Let's say that we are going to create a final list, and this list is going to be of type FLChart. I'm going to call this the actual data. And once this is done, I'm going to come to the actual constructor and say that we are going to require a naming argument called data that needs to get passed when this actual widget gets created. So then we come back to our home page, and here we can define the data. So before I do this, I'll do another thing. I'll copy all of the size box plus the custom line chart. I'll create another function. I'll call this chart1 like so. And then I am going to return whatever you see here. And then what do we do for the data? Well, as you know, the data is a list of FLCharts. So let's do FLChart. And here you can paste in any X or Y coordinate. So the first one is going to be 1, 1. And then I'll just copy this, paste it a couple of times, paste it a couple of times. And then I'm going to just update the values. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to do the same here as well, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's basically a straight line. And if I do this, do command save, come back to my custom line chart, scroll down to where it says spots, set the spots to the data, do save. And I assume the reason we're not seeing anything is because if I go back to my home page, oh yeah, we've not added chart1 to the actual column here. So let's add that, save. And there we go. Now we're seeing a line that shows our points, as you can see, the ones that we passed, and it's basically a straight line. Now what I'm going to do is show you the power of doing things this way, is because if I go back to my home page, now I'll just copy this chart1 widget. I'll paste it again. This time I'll call it chart2, and I'll change the points to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but here I'll do 1. Let's do 10, let's do 5, 15, then let's do 3, and let's do 7, save. And then let's take chart2 and scroll and add it after chart1 in the column. You're going to see that now we're using the same widget, which is custom line chart, but we're displaying two different line charts with whatever data we want within them. So now let's go ahead and fix some actual elements that I see in terms of styling on this line chart. The first thing that I'd like to do is basically change the colors for the line and some other things on that. So to change the color of the line, you can come here and say color, and then you can do colors.green, save, and you're going to see now that the line has turned green and the spots have turned green. If you do not want to show the line, you can set bar width to 0, and the line is not going to be shown. If you want to show the line, you can set it to anything above 0, and that'll reduce how thick the line is. So let's do 4, 2, and I think my testing 2 looks very nice. Once this is done, there are other things that you can do. For example, if you want to curve the actual line chart, you can set is curve to true. That is going to curve everything, as you can see. And I like that. And finally, I'd like to add a gradient underneath of this. So for that, I'm going to set the below bar data property. You can also, if you want to set a color above the line, set the above bar data property. But these are things that you can work around with. I'm just showing you the very crux of what you can do. And here we are going to be saying it's going to be bar area data. And then here we are going to set the gradient property to be linear gradient, and it needs a list of colors. So in my case, the colors are just going to be light green accent on light green. I'll paste them in. And still you're not going to see anything. And the reason for that is because we need to go ahead and set the show property on the bar area data to true. And then as soon as I do this, you're going to see that the gradient is being shown. I'd like to change the actual begin and end alignment for this gradient. So I can come back to the gradient and I can set the begin to be alignment. And then I believe it's going to be dot top center. And then for the end, it's going to be alignment. And then we can do bottom center. And now the gradient looks nice as well. As you can see, starts light at the top, becomes dark. You can switch it as well. And then it will be dark at the top, light on the middle. I like this, so we can move on to the next step. For the next step, what I'd like to do is basically show you how you can go ahead and change the actual grid data that you're seeing here. So by the grid data, I mean the stuff that you're seeing at the back, which is this grid with dotted lines. So how can we change that? Well, to change that, you can come to the line chart and then to the line chart data. And on this, we are going to have an actual property, and it's called grid data. And then to define the grid data, again, I am going to go ahead and say that we're going to have a function which returns FLGrid data. And I'm going to say that this function will be called underscore build grid data. And then it's going to return FLGrid data, like so. And then here you can define a bunch of different attributes for how you want the grid to be shown or styled. For example, if you do not want the grid to be shown at all, you can set this to false. And if you go ahead and do this and set this grid data to be this build grid data function, you can see that the grid is not now going to be shown. If you want to show it, you can set it to true. If you just want to show, for example, vertical lines, you can do draw horizontal lines false. Now only the vertical ones are being shown. And if you don't want to show the vertical ones, you can do draw vertical lines to false. And now none of the lines are being shown. So it's completely up to do. What I'll do is set both of these to true. And we can move on to the next part. So for the next part, what I'd like to do is basically change how these axes are shown, and then how the border is shown as well. So let's do the borders first, and then we'll come to the actual titles. So by the border, I refer to this actual border that you see that is outside covering the entire graph, this black line. I'm not referring to the actual axes that you see here, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The values that are on the axis. So the border is just this black outline that you see. So how can we change this? For that, again, there's a property called border data. And I'm going to say that again, there's going to be a function that returns FL border data. I'm going to say that this will be called build border data, like so. And then this function is going to return FL border data. If you don't want to show the border, just return false for show. There's nothing else that you want to do. Then take this and set this to be border data, do save, and now the border is not going to be shown. What I'd like to do is basically change the actual styling of the border. So for that, what I'll do is set the border property on the FL border data object, and I'm going to say that it's going to be border.all, and I'm going to say that the color for the border is going to be colors.red. Weird color combination choice, but we'll stick with it. And then I also like to set the width of the border to be 1. And as soon as I do this and set the show property to true, now we have a red border that surrounds the graph. Let's do black. I liked black better. So black, and there we go. We can set it to green. You can change the width to whatever you want. For example, 10, it'll make the border really thick, but let's do 2. 2 looks great. And then we can set it to black. And there we go. It looks good with 1. So now the last thing that we're going to be talking about is how we can programmatically show which actual axis we want to show which we want to hide, and how we want to actually show the actual values that are being displayed for the axes. So this is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'll try to make it as easy as possible. So to define the actual axis and how you want to show these axes, there's another property, and it's called titles data. And this basically refers to the axis that you're seeing here. So again, the titles data, if you see, expects us to pass it a full titles data object. So let's create a function that returns FL's title data, and I will call this function build titles data, and then I'm going to say that it returns FL's title data. And with this, I will come to the top. Now I'll set the titles data to be equal to this function, like so. So now we can define whatever we want to do here. Well, firstly, what I'd like to do is tell you that we have a show property here as well. If we set it to false, then none of the axes will be shown, as you can see. But I do not want to do that, so I'll set this to true. Now, if we want to selectively decide which axes we want to show, which titles we want to show, what you can do is say left titles, and then on this, it needs to be of type axis titles. And there's a property on this called side titles, which is going to be of type side titles, on which we have a property show titles, which I can set to false. And now if you've guessed it right, the axis, which is the left, is not going to be shown. So let's do this. Let's copy this axis titles part, and let's do right titles, set it to the same, left titles, then do top titles, set it to the same, and bottom titles, set it to the same. So what I'd like to do is only show the bottom titles, so I'll set it to true. And I'll also like to show the left titles, so I'll set those to true as well. And then the two things that are not showing, which are the right and the top titles, I'll copy them and I'll paste them at the top here. So now we are only showing the left titles and the bottom titles. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to fix for the left titles first. And those are the actual intervals that we are showing here, as you can see. And then you can see that the actual axis sizing is incorrect, as for the second graph, the values that are double digits are overlapping onto each other, so we'll fix that. So how can we do this? Well, firstly, I'll come to left titles and I'll set a property on this called reserve size. And this basically defines how much size is this axis going to take if you want to have a fixed size. So what I'm going to do is set it to 10. Let's see if it fixes it. It doesn't. Let's do 20, 30, 40, and as you can see, 30 works good because now I can see 15, 14, 12, 10, everything looks great. Another thing that I'd like to do is, and this doesn't relate to the actual graph, but I can see that the graph basically takes up the entire area within the graph and some things get cut up. So I'd like to come to the card, come to the line chart, and I'll to basically wrap it with a padding widget and set the padding to be edgeInsets.all, and let's do 2. It's not enough, let's do 10. And now it looks good. So with this done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is coming down and working on the left titles again. Another thing that I'd like to do on the left titles is that I see that the actual left titles are showing the minimum value and the maximum value, and I do not like that. So I'm going to say, is the minimum value included? False. And this won't show the minimum value. And then I'll set the max included to false, and this won't show the maximum value. So now my actual title on the left sides look great, they're evenly spaced, and everything looks good. If I'd like to define a custom interval, because for now you can see that the interval is 1, so and for this is, as you can see, 2, 2, 2. But if I want the intervals to be a specific way, I can define the interval to be 1, and now our axis is going to be divided into intervals of 1. If we do not specify this, then the FLCharts package will automatically decide what type of interval looks best for the graph that we are showing. So now the left titles look great, or the left axis you can call it. So the only things left now are the bottom titles. So for the bottom titles, I like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are being displayed. The only thing that I'd like to change is I'd like to change how these actual widgets get built and how they get displayed. So if you want to change how these actual title widgets get made, and I mean the individual values that you're seeing here, so 1, 2, 3, there's a function that you can define on the site titles object called that titles widget, and it basically passes you a value and a meta property. We do not need to mess with the meta property, but the value is the actual value that will be shown on the x-axis. So here you can, for example, return a text widget with the actual value. Let's do that, plus XYZ, for example. And if I do this, you're going to see that every value that's being shown on the bottom titles now has 1, which is the value, and then XYZ, 2, and the value XYZ. But what I'd like to do is basically say day, and then whatever the value is, save. And now you can see it says day 1, day 2, day 3. And then what I'd like to do is basically make sure that the value is an integer. And with this done, you can see that now it says day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. So now the graph is looking absolutely stunning. Again, I'd like to make sure that the days that I see here, the min and the max, are not being included. So I can set the min included to false and the max included to false as well. And if I do this, now we're only saying day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And if you just want to show specific intervals, you can set the interval property to 2. And now we're only seeing every 2 days. You can remove it, and then the package will automatically decide which interval works for this specific axis. So with that done, that's pretty much all you need to know when it comes to working with FLCharts within Flutter. There's a whole bunch of other customization things that you can do with these graphs, such as when the user clicks on these actual spots, what type of value is displayed. And for that, I recommend that you go ahead and take a look at the FLCharts packages documentation that's available on the pub.dev page. And it's going to basically show you everything you need to know to create stunning graphs, such as this line chart that I've shown you. If you want tutorials on how to create other type of charts, such as bar charts, pie charts, scatter plots, radar charts, using the FLChart package within your Flutter application, then definitely hit a thumbs up on the video and leave your comments down below letting me know that you'd like a video on such topic. And with that, stay happy, stay healthy, keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.